Did you know high-quality versions of all episodes of Freedom Rocks are available on DVD? Each DVD contains 3 episodes for just $15. We also have specials that aren't on our CTV or YouTube. You can find links to all of our DVDs on the Freedom Rocks website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com.
Welcome to Freedom Rocks. My name is Mark Glogowski. We're here today to interview Chris Edes. Chris Edes is a Libertarian candidate for governor for 2014. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Good. I understand that in your travels to become governor, you've come across lots of issues that you'd like to address. Is there any particular issue you would like to start with?
Let's start with gun rights.
Okay.
And the SAFE Act.
And what's the problem with the SAFE Act?
The problem with the SAFE Act is that it was not thought through. There was never any concern on the part of Governor Cuomo and the people drafting the bill for the Second Amendment rights of the people. There was not even really a rational process of trying to understand how to solve the problems of crime or to deal with issues related to mental health. It appears, of course I can't see into Governor Cuomo's mind, but it appears to have been a political stunt to attempt to take advantage of a terrible tragedy and position himself for the presidential race in 2016 by being the first guy to come out with a gun control bill and to have it be the toughest, as they always say, in the nation. And there's, as a result, it was passed with the message of necessity, which, eliminated any opportunity for public input, eliminated the normal process of going through the various committees that would have input on the legislation. The one Democratic state senator basically elucidated the reason as being that the anti-gun safety people, meaning those who are concerned with their constitutional rights, would be able to mobilize and have a chance to have input on the legislation. And so in order to avoid that, they literally had to pass it in the middle of the night. And it's been criticized by law enforcement for being completely ineffective at reducing crime of any kind.
But doesn't it make sense that if you restrict the number of guns that are out there, the people are safer?
No, not really. I mean, first of all, okay, the criminals are going to have guns anyway. We're reaching a point right now where, you can have a 3D printer, right? I mean, we're right on the verge of just being able to make guns in your living room. And that's coming down the road. We're not there yet, but that's coming. But even without that technology, criminals can always get guns because they steal them. They can have other people make the purchases for them. They can do, any number of things. And, the idea that we're going to get all these guns out of circulation and that's going to somehow solve the problem is just not feasible.
Well, look at the cities. They have some of the toughest gun laws. Aren't they pretty much secure? We have Chicago, in Detroit, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles. Aren't those pretty much secure cities with pretty much no crime now?
I trust you're being ironic.
Yes,
No, of course, yes. Though they have rampant crime. In fact, in the city of Chicago, about a month or two ago, the Chicago police said that they're not going to respond to robberies. They have too much to do. They're not going to respond to robberies unless someone is in imminent danger of harm. Don't even call them. Don't just, figure out what was stolen and give them a list, and maybe they can get the stuff back for you. But don't call 911 and expect anyone to drive out there and actually try to stop the robbery or chase the bad guys.
Well, they're not going to get there in time to stop the robbery anyway. It takes 20 minutes most of the time or longer.
Yeah. Well, maybe with a burglary, but if someone's like robbing a house, it might take longer. Mm-hmm. But basically, I mean, they just said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be there to protect you from robbery. And so, I mean, that only leaves you to either be a victim or protect yourself. And, at least at this point, with the McDonald versus Chicago case, they can't have a blanket prohibition. But as in Washington, D.C., the city of Chicago is not moving to make firearms accessible to people for personal defense. They're still dragging their heels and making it as difficult as possible. And so people are, the criminals are able to basically roam free. And this applies to, pretty much any urban area where the rights of the citizens to keep and bear arms are restricted. Criminals are bolder. They know that their victims are defenseless, and they act more aggressively. Everywhere that people are disarmed in these gun-free zones, that's where people go to, when they're unstable and they want to commit some sort of mass murder. I mean, since the Gun-Free School Zones Act was put into place, with one exception, which is the Gabby Gifford shooting, every other mass killing has taken place in a gun-free zone. That's where they go. Criminals.
So in the city of Rochester here, we have two essentially gun-free zones, which are very unsafe. One being the schools, where we send our kids, and the teachers have no guns to protect them. I thought it was kind of ironic that the one teacher's plan was to put as many kids underneath their desks as she could, and then for the last kid, she would stand in front of them. Hopefully when the person came through the door, they wouldn't see them. So we have the schools as a gun-free zone, and we have the parks as a gun-free zone. So would you consider going to a park on a Sunday evening to have a nice, relaxing evening with your family?
Well, you can't live in fear. So I would, I'm not going to stay out of the parks on the basis that somebody might commit a crime. But certainly, I think that it unnecessarily puts people in danger. I mean, there have been muggings in parks. Some of those could have been stopped. There's always the potential for somebody being harmed. I mean, if people are of the moral disposition that they're going to rob you, if they're having a really bad day, maybe they'll hit you over the head, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that happens sometimes in robberies. It's not so much that there is a hideous danger in the city parks as that it's just an intellectually indefensible position.
Right.
And that is, if we were really concerned, right, that, say, concealed carry permit holders were dangerous people, we would have a problem with them just walking down the street. I mean, right now, under current law, they can just be packing and walk down the street right in front of people's houses where their kids are playing. And well, first of all, nothing ever happens, because gun owners are not dangerous people. But it doesn't make sense to do that and then in a park where, a lot of times we have these trails and they wind around corners where someone could be waiting to, rob somebody around the bend. That's the place where we say, no, you can't have guns. And I think that's what makes the parks issue kind of stand out, because that's a place where you might expect crime to take place. Like, for instance, with the schools, do you really expect to get mugged in a school? No, not really. That wouldn't be where you'd go if you wanted to rob somebody, because there's too many people around. But in the parks, yeah, that's the kind of scenario where you would have to worry about that, especially if you were alone or walking the trails. If you're out in the middle of a field near the pavilion with your family, probably not so much, but I'd be more concerned about, just taking a stroll by yourself or jogging or whatever. And there have been feral animals that people have rabies that have attacked people too.
Now, there's been a lot of opposition to this SAFE Act we're going to have to take a break here in a minute. Let's take a break, and we'll come right back.
As you may have noticed, you can watch Freedom Rocks for free on RCTV or on YouTube, but it takes money to produce good quality TV shows. You can support Freedom Rocks by shopping at our Cafe Press shop. There you can find t-shirts for men and women, tote and gym bags, coffee mugs, beer steins, food and beverage thermoses, and a bunch of other items Cafe Press offers. You can find our shop at cafepress.com/freedomrocks, all lowercase and no apostrophe.
Okay. Before we took the break, we were talking about the gun issue, and there's been a lot of opposition to it in these demonstrations, the Second Amendment rights people. Have you been involved in any of those?
Yes, I have. In my capacity as chair for the Monroe County chapter of SCOPE, the Shooters Committee on Political Education, I organized 3 SCOPE buses for the rally on February 28th, 1 SCOPE bus for this recent rally on June 11th. And, I think that the turnout in both cases was exceptional. We had to expect that turnout would be higher immediately following the SAFE Act, but if you look at what happened on the June 11th rally, there were probably like 4,000 or 5,000 people out there. And that by itself is far more than ever come to lobby in the Capitol.
Okay. I have a problem with the Second Amendment people. Okay. First off, there's the issue of, what's a well-regulated militia. And clearly, somehow or other, the Second Amendment is transferred into you owning guns. Let's just assume you have a Second Amendment right to own a gun and to use it to protect yourself. The problem with our society today is that in 1913, our country's structure, the structure that the U.S. Constitution was intended to create and preserve, that structure was destroyed when the 16th Amendment was instituted. The 16th Amendment is the one that gave Congress the unconstitutional power to issue an unconstitutional tax. And the reason it's unconstitutional is because the 16th Amendment creates a structure in society where 100% of everything you earn and everything that everyone else earns belongs to the federal government. And ever since 1913, the federal government has been able to tell you how much of their money that you earn for them that you can keep and how you have to spend the money that they allow you to keep, or they can take everything back. And they can take as much back as they want. And a perfect example of this is the Health Care Act, referred to as Obamacare. 100% unconstitutional, except Congress has the authority to issue a tax. That reference by Justice Roberts, was to the 16th Amendment. He went on to say that that is the law of the land. If you don't like the law of the land, only the Congress, with the assistance of the people, can change the law of the land. Okay, let's go back to the gun issue.
Okay.
The government owns 100% of your income. It's not your money. They can tell you how you have to spend it. They have already established the ability to do retroactive taxes. They can retroactively say you cannot own a gun with any money that was earned since 1913. And therefore, they can just pick them up because you're not supposed to spend your money that way. So why don't they just do that? It has nothing to do with Second Amendment rights. If you bought a gun before 1913, you can own it. But if you bought it after that, it's government money you spent. It's not your gun. They just made it illegal, retroactively. It's not the first time they made a law retroactive where if you bought something and then they make it illegal, you're a criminal unless you get rid of it instantly. Well, this is the same thing. There's no reason why they can't pass a law saying you can't own a gun purchased with government money. It belongs to the government, and we're going to pick up all the government's guns now. So what are they going to do then? The U.S. Supreme Court will allow that to happen because that is the power the 16th Amendment gives Congress, is to issue a tax, and they can do it retroactively. And with that power, they have changed society. They have changed entirely the structure of what our government can tell you have to do.
What I do about that?
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, there's definitely unresolved legal issues there. I disagree with, let's call it the Roberts decision, just because he turned traitor on this and should have supported the Second Amendment.
But didn't he say that is the law of the land? Congress has the authority to issue a tax. This is a tax.
Right.
He also said the Supreme Court cannot change the law of the land. Only Congress, at the insistence of the people, can change the law of the land. So if you want to change the law of the land as far as health care, change the 16th Amendment, rescind it. If you want to change the law of the land as far as the ownership of the weapons that you have in your possession, you got to change the 16th Amendment or the government will pick them up. They have the authority to do that if Congress says you can't own them anymore.
I think it would be harder with Obamacare using a justification like that because there is a Second Amendment. There isn't really an amendment in the Bill of Rights with regards to health care one way or the other. I mean, probably didn't even think about it back then. But, if there's...
The Constitution was set up to create a limited government which did not interfere with your decisions around as to how you're going to live your life. The U.S. Constitution is essentially a piece of paper, like Obama says, because of the 16th Amendment. If an unconstitutional amendment destroys the structure that the Constitution was supposed to create, the Constitution doesn't exist then, because the structure that was supposed to be created no longer exists. And if we want that structure again, if we want people to be able to actually own their own lives and to own their property and to own what they actually earn, the 16th Amendment has to go, or the 16th or the U.S. Constitution is a non-entity. All these constitutionalists, they allow the 16th Amendment to sit on the books. What do you got? You got a 16th Amendment and nothing else. There is no other constitution to back it up.
I don't know that the courts would necessarily see it that way.
They have seen it that way. That's what Obamacare is. You look at the rulings. Every ruling that has to do with money falls back to the authority of the 16th Amendment. You are free to do anything you want to do as long as it does not involve money. If it involves money, it is regulated. You have to have licenses to drive down the road because it involves money. You have to have a license to earn a living in most professions. The 16th Amendment gives Congress, gives the authority to the governments all the way down through the local governments. And they're abusing it big time.
I don't think that,
Let's stay on the subject of taxes, government taxes.
Okay.
Fair tax versus a sales tax, federal sales tax. What's your position? Which would you rather see?
You mean fair tax versus the income tax?
Or versus a fair tax, which is a sales tax, versus a flat tax, rather.
A flat tax? Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by a flat tax? Like everybody pays the same rate?
As people talk about it, it means that you earn an income of $30,000 or $100,000. 10% of everything you earn just goes to the government.
Yeah. Well, I don't particularly like, either one. I think I would tend to support a sales tax over an income tax because there's so many exemptions. Assuming I have to pick one, because there's the way the income tax is structured now. There's so many different exemptions for various things that it amounts to social engineering, because the government is saying, well, you'll pay more taxes if you do this and less taxes if you do this, and it becomes a means of trying to control your behavior. Second, because I think that the current tax structure, in somewhat of a similar way, it allows some people to, for instance, large corporations to pay no taxes at all, or even to get negative taxes to the point where, the government is just handing out money and calling that a tax. You know, and it all becomes so like irrational at some point that a simpler
the entire
system.
tax structure has become very irrational. We're a little bit overdue here for a break. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Have you ever played WTF Sudoku?
You mean WTF as in what the f***?
Yes.
What the f*** is so all fired? What the f*** about Sudoku?
Regular Sudoku is played on a 9x9 grid with exactly one of every digit 1 through 9 in every row, column, and 3x3 grid.
So what?
WTF Sudoku is played on a 25x25 grid with exactly one of every letter A through Y in every row, column, and 5x5 group.
WTF. How can I play WTF Sudoku?
You can play it online at www.cybermansoftware.com/games. You can also buy a book of puzzles on Amazon.com. Just search for WTF Sudoku.
Book? You mean on paper?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's www.cybermansoftware.com/games or by searching for WTF Sudoku on Amazon.com?
Yes.
Okay, we're back. I'll have to remember to pay attention to the timing a little better. We're a little overdue here. The reason I brought up the issue of the flat tax versus a sales tax is because one of them is unconstitutional and the other one is authorized by the 16th Amendment. The sales tax is a tax that you pay when you buy something. The only time you pay it is when you buy something. If you don't buy anything, they can't tax you because you're not buying something. A flat tax is still an income tax. It still requires you to report to the government every penny you earn because they want a percentage of it. And they still get to determine what percentage they take. We rescind the 16th Amendment. There is no flat tax. There is no income tax. There's no income tax for you. There's no income tax for businesses. Can you imagine what businesses' life would be like if they had no tax? They didn't have to report to the government how they're spending their money. Right now, they have to get their expenditures approved by the government or they're taxed again. So there is a difference between a flat tax and a fair tax.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So we have this tax structure that's changed the structure of society, and I'm claiming that it will impact your right to actually consider the weapon you own as belonging to you.
Right. I think that people would have a lot of problems if they tried to use the 16th Amendment to confiscate all the weapons. I don't think that that would be a defensible position in the courts because there is a Second Amendment, and they would at very least have to strike some balance, and that balance could not be that the Second Amendment completely evaporates.
Well, they'll twist the thumb screws slowly because they'll first look at the people that are psychologically unstable, and then they'll throw the military people into that because, let's face it, they've had a rough time when they're in combat and all the training that they've had. And then they'll make sure that anyone that's taken like Prozac or any of these drugs, mind-altering drugs, they'll make sure that they don't own guns too, and they'll just do it one group at a time, and next thing you know, nobody owns them.
Right. Well, they're kind of already doing that. I don't think they need the 16th Amendment to.
They're already doing that.
Yeah, that's what the whole process. That's.
So you're saying, but they won't do it to you. They'll do it to other people, and we'll sit back and watch them, but they won't do it to you.
No, I'm just saying I don't think the 16th Amendment has to come into play at all in that. Mm-hmm. But, really, isn't that a federal issue?
The gun control, federal issue? What's the state doing it then?
Taxation is a federal issue.
But see, the
income tax
the structure has been adopted by the states. States have state income tax. And that structure has been adopted by even the local towns and villages, because now they just arbitrarily assume that because it's not your property, they can just tax it until you don't own it anymore. And sooner or later, if it gets too expensive, you'll have to sell it.
Right. But I don't think the 16th Amendment, I'm pretty sure the states were able to impose an income tax prior to the 16th Amendment. I mean, that only affects the federal government. The states have always had the ability to impose a tax. If you're looking at it from a strict constitutional basis, each state constitution would be the determining factor. Whether there's a federal income tax or not doesn't really play into that. It's the federal constitution used to restrict the federal government from imposing direct taxation because it had to be in proportion to the state's population. And that's what the 16th Amendment eliminated, was that requirement, and allowed them to directly tax you. I mean, it's...
Okay, we're going to have to come back to this. I'd like to point out that this is Freedom Rocks, and if you would visit our website, freedomrocks.cybermansoftware.com. This is a nonprofit organization, and again, we're sitting here with Chris Edes. He's a candidate for governor 2014. Look forward to talking to you more about this in the future, Chris.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.